All right, hello and welcome Dickinson parents and students to today's session with members of our campus leadership team. We're going to give just a few moments for attendees to connect to the session before we get started. So I'm going to just give a moment and pause and let you all join the session, connect to audio, and prepare for our time together. All right, I see our space filling up with many familiar names, so we'll go ahead and begin. First, Dickinsonians, we are so happy that you could join us here today, and we thank you for the many questions you've submitted in advance of this session. My name is Molly Bogle. I'll be serving as your session moderator today. We'll use our time together to address those questions you've submitted through the remarks of our panel. If there are questions that remain, you're welcome to submit those through the Q&A feature of the webinar, and we'll address them as we are able. You're also welcome to continue to send your questions to ask@dickinson.edu. Additionally, this session will be recorded, and a communication will be sent directing you to that recording. Now, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to introduce Dickinson's 29th president, Dr. Margie Ensign. President Ensign's leadership, her belief in Dickinson's mission to provide a useful education for the common good, and her vision for our future have been instrumental in all moments, but this one especially. I'm pleased to turn the session over to her for colleague introductions and for her own welcome remarks. President Ensign.
Thank you so much, Molly, and good afternoon to everyone who is on the Zoom call. Afternoon if you're on the East Coast, good morning if you're on the West Coast, and good evening if you are international students and parents overseas. Thank you for being with us today. Let me first introduce many of our senior staff members who are with me. Let me start with our Provost and Dean of the Faculty, Neil Weissman. Neil, put a wave out to everybody.
Hello all.
Bronte Burley-Jones, our Vice President of Finance and Administration, and she's joined by Leah Young, our Director of Financial Aid. You too.
Hello.
Hi.
George Stroud, our Vice President of Student Life and Dean of Students.
Hello.
And Kathy Davenport, who is our Dean of Enrollment Management. Thank you, Kathy, and Dean of Admissions.
Terrific, thank you.
Thanks for being with us, everyone. I know many of you are disappointed in our decision to go fully remote. We share that disappointment. There's nothing more than that our staff and all of us love is a fall, when students return to our beautiful campus, when our new students come and we help you move in and we get to know you. And we were all looking forward to that moment in August. So why did we change? Why did the decision change from June, when I announced that we would be back, to recently, to last week, when I said that we were changing course? Let's back up a little bit. From the beginning of this pandemic, we have said, and we have lived by the value and the principle that health and safety is our priority. Your health, the health of our students, the health of our faculty, the health of our staff, the health of our community. When that announcement went out in June, things were moving forward. I said in that announcement that we were able to test and get about a 2-day turnaround to those tests. As this unfolded, that turnaround date changed to 5 days, to 7. Some it's taking as long as 9. Testing is absolutely critical to control this deadly virus. Some of you have said, did you try? Did you try to find alternate sources of testing? Oh, did we try? We reached out to other national suppliers and they said, we're at that point now too. We talked to scientists around the world, in the country, and many of those tests are close, but some of the ones that you parents have recommended don't have FDA approval yet. We did talk to a NASA scientist whose test did just get FDA approval, but it's not scalable yet. So we did search long and hard and wide. And some of you parents have said to me, you work for businesses where there's a very fast turnaround. And that's wonderful. But one of the things we're seeing with this pandemic, it's obviously not a common response across states and local communities. So we tried very hard to get a test that would allow us to monitor and control the virus. The second thing, in June, when I announced, we were told we would have state support for contact tracing, the second piece that must be in place for this virus. Honestly, that hasn't happened yet. Our local community has partnered with our healthcare providers, and we are working on that, including with Penn Medical. But I can't tell you that contact tracing is in place to the extent we would need to have all of our students back. Those two things are absolutely critical. We will continue and are continuing to work as rapidly as we can as these tests unfold and evolve to be able to open in the spring. That is our hope, that is our expectation. Others have said, why did you go first? Other peer institutions have not made this announcement. I'll be very honest, when this started in March, we were the first to bring our students home from overseas. I think we had some sense of what was unfolding. Some of you were concerned that we were moving too fast. As it evolved, some of you also reached out and said your children made it home, and some of your friends' children were stuck for a long time. We have led and we are leading because our priority, as I've said from the beginning, is health and safety and well-being. We share your disappointment, but we're excited about what the fall will bring for our students and faculty. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about that in a minute. Many of you have asked, well, how are your finances? Are you strong enough to handle this? We've had incredible financial management at Dickinson for a long, long time, and our wonderful VP of Finance will talk about that. We've put reserves aside for challenging times, not knowing we would be facing this, but very cautious, prudent policies are in place so that, yes, we can withstand this. There's a couple other things you should know. When Standard & Poor's did their evaluation of our whole sector last year, we got an A+ rating with a stable view for the future. Many did not. Many were downgraded, and Bronte will talk a little bit more about the finances. I think that's really important. I've said for the spring, we will do our very best to reopen. I fully expect these tests to evolve. There's a lot on the horizon, and we will keep you posted on our spring plans. But first, we're going to start a terrific fall semester. I promise that. Before I turn it over to our provost, I want to read just briefly from an email I got from one of you. To me, it's inspiring. It shows the passion and the energy and the commitment of our faculty. And it shows that even in this extraordinarily difficult moment, a transformative Dickinson education not only can happen, is happening. So I won't identify the student, so mom out there, don't worry, but I will identify our faculty member. So let me just read a little bit. Our son has, in the quiet of the pandemic, and thanks to Professor Ben Edwards, completely found his way academically. Dr. Edwards invited him to be part of a glacier research project, and that has lit the fire. And that's what we want for all of you. He's planning on majoring in environmental sciences and earth sciences with a focus on the hard sciences. He has a particular interest in extreme environments and currently in how research in that area will be of use to NASA in future exploration of Mars and so on. As he works on his fall schedule, his teachers have been beyond accommodating. That's the Dickinson way. As a result of all of this, his motivation is sky high, and he's looking forward to the fall. I'm sure his interests will continue to evolve, but it's gratifying to see a young person find their way, and none of us feel it would have been possible at another place. Thank you for being with us. Provost Weisman?
Thank you, Margie, and appreciation to all of those who are listening to this session. As you would imagine, among the many, many questions that we received, lots of them had to do with the academic program. And I'm going to try to cover as many of them as possible. But I want to tell you right away that if I don't cover a question that you've offered, or if you want more information about something that I've said or disagree with it, I will be really happy to get emails from you. My email is easily found on the website, and so that's an open invitation. We believe firmly that knowing more is always helpful. So the way I want to approach this is I want to talk first about what I'm calling the big question. And then after the big question, deal with some of the more specific ones. The big question, of course, is what will be the quality of the remote experience from a learning standpoint in the fall? I know that Dickinson, what we did in the spring was uneven for reasons that I'll mention briefly in a moment. A lot of the courses actually were quite good, but others were not, and so there is that. And I know that many of you who are first years had high school experiences at the end of last year that were not very satisfying. So I understand the concern. And we have worked very hard to guarantee that the experience that you have will be a good one. So let me just make some points about why I believe that. First of all, the most basic thing is that the course credits that you earn in the fall will count toward your overall Dickinson degree. So in terms of moving forward with your education in that way, it will count fully. Classes will be taught by our faculty. These people are experts at what they do. They're extraordinarily good teachers. I would argue they're among the best teachers anywhere. And they are fully committed to this. We did a survey of students in the spring about their experience, and one of the questions was, did your faculty care about you? Were they concerned about your learning? 80% of the respondents said yes, only 6% said no. And when you remember that on these kinds of surveys, the unhappy usually are more represented than the happy, it's a pretty extraordinary response. And I guarantee you that our faculty will pour that same passion and caring that they had in the spring into what they do in the fall. We have not furloughed or let go any faculty. It's an all hands on deck circumstance, and so they will be fully present and entirely involved. Classes will continue to be small. We haven't increased any caps on classes, and that means that faculty will have a good opportunity to get to know you. I was talking with a Spanish professor a couple days ago, remotely, but talking nonetheless, and she said, you know, in my upper level class, I've already taught more than half of those students. I know them pretty well, and it's a small class. I'll get to know everyone in a flash. And that's common, I think, across our courses. Our courses online are designed to fit the Dickinson curriculum. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you take Introduction to Calculus at Dickinson, it's organized and structured to prepare you for going on with a Dickinson math major to do advanced work. The same would be true in a foreign language course. If you're taking French 1 or French 2, that will prepare you for the next semester. That's not the case for classes that are offered elsewhere. So in terms of faculty commitment, in terms of size of class, in terms of fit, it'll all be there. One enormous difference between spring and now, of course, is time to prepare. In the spring, our faculty had 4 or 5 days to go from their normal in-person classes into an online environment. That's really no time at all, and it had a big impact. Since then, knowing that we would perhaps go remote, and now knowing that we will go remote, and making the decision early, by the way, being a leader in this regard, makes it easier for our faculty to focus on what they need to do, as opposed to thinking of all the multiple options that are out there. But this time, we've developed a very active faculty development program. We've had a Ready for Fall group of expert faculty and academic technicians designing modules that faculty can use to get down the basics and have access to more advanced possibilities for online education. Faculty departments have been meeting collectively to talk about what they'll do. So there's been a whole lot more preparation. You know, to put it sort of in a nutshell, in the spring, faculty had to learn the tools. They had to learn how best to use things like Moodle or Zoom or Teams. Now they know the tools. They're preparing how to teach, not how to use the tools, but how to make the best learning experience. And I think it's going to be radically different than what happened in the spring or what high school students would have experienced. And I'll have some more detail on that momentarily. Some students have asked, we did not do course evaluations in the spring. We thought it was unfair to faculty to ask them to switch mid-semester and then have evaluations. But we will do course evaluations in the fall. So faculty will be held accountable for what they're doing. And I should note, when I announced that to the faculty, I expected a lot of people saying, is this entirely fair? In fact, not a single faculty member complained. They're perfectly willing to be held accountable for what they do. And there's one last point, which for me is in some ways the biggest about all of this. I know when I think about remote instruction and what we're doing in the fall, my natural sort of default is to think, well, how does it compare with in-person, with what we normally do here in the academic program? That, in fact, is a false comparison, because we're not comparing remote with what normally would be taught here at Dickinson. We're comparing remote with what you might call pandemic in-person, the kind of experience that we or any other college are going to be able to deliver on campus in the fall. Safety clearly was the first and primary factor in our making this decision. But in thinking about remote education versus the way it would be here on campus in the fall, it also seemed the right thing to go remote. So for example, maybe a third of our faculty who have underlying health conditions, age considerations, family considerations, would be teaching remotely. I know at other campuses, provosts estimate as many as half would be doing that. So you'd be here on campus in your rooms with your laptops doing remote education. For faculty who are in person, there would be social distancing in the classroom, which means everyone's 6 feet apart. Everyone would be wearing masks. There's no possibility to do breakout groups. If you think, for example, of a foreign language class, faculty in the front would probably be wearing a shield. Students would be wearing shields. Students would be many feet away from the professor. And it's fair to ask, how would that go? If there is any appearance of COVID on campus, and we're pretty confident, unhappily, that there would be, we'll have students not only being socially isolated, but everybody who's been in contact with them quarantined for 14 days, which means special remote accommodations will have to be done for them. So what we concluded on the big question is that we can provide a very good remote experience, and that remote experience would be better, actually, than what we could do in person. So let me turn to some of the more specific questions, and that'll, I think, add a little bit more richness, maybe clarity to what I've just said. First of all, one question that we've got a lot, understandably, is will the focus be on synchronous, by which I mean live, synchronous classes or asynchronous work? I know Dickinson students in particular, and totally understandably, because that's why you're at Dickinson, think of face-to-face as the way the teaching needs to be done. In point of fact, there are uses for asynchronous materials, things that are online that aren't live, that you can dial into when you need. So, for example, if you miss a class, having it available online is a help. If you want to go back and review what happened, it's a help. There's a lot of things like databases that would be asynchronous and online anyway. Having said that, though, the emphasis in the fall, and this will be different from the spring, is on synchronous education. The basic premise here, and I'm going to quote from the Ready for Fall Group's materials about it, it runs as follows, and I quote, "At Dickinson, we approach remote learning with liberal arts values in mind. Active and student-centered teaching and online learning environments in which the professor is present and intent on building community with and among students." That's the focus that we'll have. So there will be a larger component of face-to-face than there was in the spring. One specific question some folks have asked, is will faculty have regular office hours? And the answer to that is definitely yes. So we'll be doing more synchronous face-to-face work. One specific learning environment that people have been concerned about, totally understandably, we're concerned about it too, is science labs. And our faculty have been active addressing that particular challenge. I'm going to give you two examples and then get to the main point about labs. So, for example, in one of our genetics courses, what the faculty are doing is they'll have the students review the literature to identify a gene that's of interest to them. They then can go online, readily available, and sequence the genome to find where that gene is placed. They then will develop protocols for experiments about how to clone the gene and how to produce mutations of the gene. Those protocols will be discussed by everyone in the class, including, of course, the faculty member. The faculty member will then go into the lab, do the experiments, videotaping all of it, and then the results will be available for the students to analyze. Or to give you another example, and this is the one that Margie mentioned earlier from Ben Edwards in Earth Sciences. He did a program this summer for students on glaciers. And he started by lecturing a bit about glaciers and about GIS, Global Information Systems. The students then went online to GIS sites, satellite sites, where they're able to download 1,600 maps of glaciers over 30 years. They then analyzed the data about those glaciers and how they changed, and they will be giving a presentation at a national conference about it. So the point here is that what is missing, and frankly, for other courses, like field courses, where faculty members can design field experiments that are crafted to your home environment, where you can actually go out and do the technical work. But mostly what would be missing is technical work. Things that they're important, but you can become proficient at that relatively easily with practice. What the emphasis will be on research, on developing hypotheses, figuring out how to do testing, and analyzing data. So that what we're actually going to be doing, and it's really what Dickinson does in person, is focusing on making you not technicians, but real scientists. And similar thinking is happening in other areas as well. I'm thinking of a sculpture class, for example, where the professor is putting together kits of tools and materials that will be sent to everyone in the class. Or I'm thinking of our language courses, where the faculty have taken the tutors that we have in our multilingual writing center and turned them into what they call conversation associates. So that in addition to faculty classes, those associates will be able to have small group interaction, giving students in class an opportunity to actually use the language more. And by the way, those small groups are not going to be possible in a socially distanced, 6 foot apart classroom. So we're confident that the quality of experience, even in labs, especially in labs maybe, and in studio art, is going to be very strong. One question we've gotten is about online supports. Are we loosening any of those? And by that, I mean, for example, the Career Center. The Career Center will be as active as ever. In the spring, they went to individual online appointments, and they'll continue to do that. They also went to online workshops. These would be workshops where students learn about interviewing, about networking, about defining the skills that they have to present to an employer. And a lot of these workshops will have prominent Dickinson alumni who are in various industries participating. All of that's already been done and will continue online. Or to give you another kind of support example, disability services. Our Office of Disability Services will contact every single student who requests an accommodation individually and work out a plan that will be effective online for them. So across the board, I think you can count on the kind of supports that you would normally expect in person. One issue that I can't give you a final result on is grading, because the academic program committee is working through it, and a lot of colleges haven't decided. I think what's likely, don't hold me to the promise, because the committee will decide. I think what's likely is that we will have grading, but with options for students who find that a challenge. More on that as we know. One person asked, actually several, will there be an opportunity to change classes? And the answer to that is yes. We are, since we've announced that we're going remote, we've asked departments to refine what they're doing. We'll have those results by next week, and any changes will be posted. And we're also asking departments to describe what the course is going to be like. And I should say to students, parents too, if you have any questions about a single course and what it might be like, email the professor. They'll be happy to tell you what they're planning and what they're thinking. Another set of questions has to do with the number of courses one might be taking in the fall. One possibility is that students could go from 4 to 3. And the answer to that is yes, you can do that automatically any semester. Students could make up for the 4th class if you have AP or other advanced credits, or it would be relatively easy in following semesters, at no cost, by the way, to catch up on that individual course. So going to 3 is something that people might wish to do. Going to 2 is a bit different. Going to 2 would mean that you're no longer fully enrolled at Dickinson, and you would need permission to do that. There would also be a fee for each of the 2 courses, but it is a viable thing to do. It has implications for financial aid, and we're working that out, but we do want to make it possible for students who feel strongly that they want to go to 2, that we would allow and support students in doing that. In terms of courses from other institutions and transfer, you can take, with permission, up to 2 courses in person at other institutions and transfer them. With the sole exception of last semester, which was in the middle of the chaos of pandemic, we have always declined transfer credit from online at other institutions, and we will continue to do that in the fall. The reason for that simply is we can't control what's done online at other institutions, and we have high confidence in what we're doing. So by way of summary, I would just say, think about it this way. We will give you a strong and rich remote instruction experience, and we're confident that it will be as good, if not better, than a pandemic-informed in-person, which would be significantly below our normal standards. Thanks, and again, feel free to email about any and all of this.
Thank you. George?
Well, hello, everyone. Again, my name is George Stroud, and I have had the pleasure of serving here as the Vice President and Dean of Students for 2 years now. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. But before I start, I just want to, again, express just how saddened me and my colleagues in student life are that our students will not be able to join us on campus this fall. I know that many of you were looking forward to having an on-campus experience. But with that being said, please know that we are working really hard here to make sure that we continue to offer a caring and engaged campus community, the same one that attracted you to attend this college. And we're working to make sure that we can have that experience for you online this fall. As I reviewed the questions that were sent prior to our meeting, there were several themes that stood out. So I've tried to develop my remarks in a way that I could address each of those themes. The first one that stood out to me was many of you were questioning just campus engagement, student engagement, and how will our students be able to bond with each other. This was especially true when it came to our incoming students who have not necessarily had the opportunity to interact with their fellow classmates or the upperclassmen or the faculty and staff who are here at Dickinson College. Again, please know that we're working really hard to convert many of our programs and opportunities to a virtual experience. We use EngageD as a platform that we have used for a few years now to do programming. And many of you are first-year students will be introduced to EngageD during orientation. Let me say that we're going to start with the RA staff. Our RAs, even though there won't be many students here on campus, we will still have RAs. And we will be asking many of those RAs to help us in building community. And this is especially true, again, for our first-year students. And making sure that we reach out to those students and building community within a certain floor section or buildings to hold virtual programs and also to serve as a point of contact for those students. We recognize that having an upper class student who can help answer some questions and lead our new students in the right direction. Even if they can't answer the question, they can point them into the right direction so that they can have their questions answered. We realize that that is extremely important, and we're going to continue to offer that. As far as programming in and of itself, again, we are moving rapidly and moving things over to a virtual format. That will begin with orientation. Our orientation program will be completely online and to make sure that our incoming students have all of the information that they need to become members of this particular community and to really have a good expectation of what the expectations are of them as they come into this community. Our activities fair, every year in the beginning of the year, we have an activities fair in which the 140 plus student organizations that we have on the campus are invited to come out and to introduce themselves and make themselves available to our students so that students have a good understanding of what is here, what's offered to the campus. That activities fair will be virtual this year, and it will occur on August 23rd this year. So I would encourage each and every one of you to please participate in the activities fair. MOB. MOB is our organization that does a lot of the student programming here, late night and weekend programming. The SLICE staff has met with the leadership in MOB, and I can tell you that they are working really hard to plan several events throughout the year to make sure that students have an opportunity to remain engaged and to work through some things. Some programs that they are also looking at right now are Netflix parties, bingo nights, trivia nights, various arts and crafts. And so they're working to do some of those things there. Fitness classes. We're offering virtual fitness classes this year. We've done this in the past, even when students were here, but we're ramping it up a little bit more. And so there will be a virtual, there will be virtual classes, yoga classes, spin classes, things of that nature that will be available to our students. Clubs and organizations, as I said, they will continue to meet online and to move their agendas forward. So again, we are really moving and making sure that we offer opportunities for students to remain engaged with themselves and also with the community at large. Another theme that arose was the issue of health and wellness. If your student needs to reach out to the wellness center, how can they do that? And will they get assistance? The answer to the question is yes. And the big question is really around mental health. We understand that there are going to be folks who need to talk to folks, need to talk to professionals here to make sure that they are moving forward and progressing in the right way. And so our wellness center will be available. Now, we will offer group therapy, which group therapy is offered in person here during the regular year, but we will offer virtual group therapy. There will be consultations that will occur. There are some challenges, I will say, for those folks who are out of state. There are some licensing measures that will make it a challenge for some states for us to offer some services. So each of those cases, if someone needs more than a consultation or group therapy, those will be looked at on a case-by-case basis with our therapists, and they will work with our students to make sure that they get the care that they receive. For the students who are on campus, the options, again, they will still have many of the virtual options that are there. If there is a need for in-person therapy, then that will be handled on a case-by-case basis with the therapist, and they will make a determination if they can meet with them in person. Another thing that came up is housing. Many people wanted to know about the housing assignment process. Would the housing assignments that have been sent out, will they carry through? Will our first year students receive their housing assignments? The answer to those questions is for the upperclassmen, as you know, you've already received your housing assignments. They were for the fall. Those will remain intact. The plan is to keep those there. And again, to allow us to build community, allow you to build community within those areas. For our first year students, I can tell you that the residence life staff, they are finalizing your housing assignments as we speak. The goal is to have those assignments out to you by the end of this week. It is important to us that you still have those assignments, again, because we want you to have the opportunity to develop community within your own cohort. And so knowing who your roommate will be when you come back in the spring, knowing who your RA would be, and trying to develop those relationships with those individuals are all important. And so we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do that. There was also, for those of you who last semester, there were several of you who left and were unable to gather your belongings before you left campus. And so, as you know, that we, the college did, for those of you who could not get back here, we were able to pack your belongings up and store those belongings for you. Those of you who can come back to get your belongings, we would ask you to do so. But we also understand that there may be a group of you who still are unable to do that. More information will be coming out as far as how we will move forward with that information, but please understand that we will continue to work with you, and we will continue to make sure that your belongings while they are here remain safe. So those are the themes. No, I'm sorry, one more, the athletics. I am sorry, there was, the other theme was about athletics, and would our athletes have access to coaches and training and things of that nature. I can tell you that our coaches have been working extremely hard since the decision was made. Actually, since before that, because as you know, the Centennial Conference made a decision a few weeks ago that we would not have fall athletics. So since that time, our coaches have been making plans for their teams and for individuals to do workouts and make sure that the teams are still available and ready to go. They are working on those plans, creating those virtual opportunities for their athletes, for their teams, working on ways to bring the team together so that they can continue to bond throughout this time as we look forward to bringing everyone back. And so, again, I would say that we are really sad that we couldn't bring you back, but we are really looking forward and hopeful that we can bring everyone back this spring semester. So thank you very much. And now I will pass this on to Bronte Burley-Jones, our Vice President for Finance and Administration.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Leah and I will actually answer a number of your business-related and operational questions. So one of the first questions had to do with the college's ability to manage COVID. And so I wanted to start by telling you that the college has been building reserves over the last 6 years. And those reserves have been set aside for unexpected challenges or opportunities that we may face. And those reserves allowed us to navigate the room and board refunds during the spring semester, and also allowed us to bring our students back from abroad early, as Margie denoted. Those reserves also allowed us to keep all of our faculty, staff, and students fully employed through the end of the fiscal year. Those same reserves are being set aside to help us manage the fall semester. So in addition to those reserves, restricted funds, cost containment measures, and potentially an additional endowment draw, the college is fully prepared to handle any of the challenges that we might face relative to COVID. More importantly, as a college community with representatives from faculty, staff, and students, we have been doing contingency planning since March. And so there are a wide range of scenarios that we have planned for with identified funding sources to be sure that we can meet all of our needs here at the college, and those go through well through the spring semester. There are questions raised about our endowment. So it's important that you know that our endowment has a current market value of $475 million. That places us within the top 20% of higher education institutions. Our endowment is managed by an organization out of Charlottesville, Virginia, Investor. We've been working with them for 10 years. We have done well with Investor. Our returns place us in the top 10% of higher education institutions. So at the close of the calendar year, our endowment had a value in excess of $500 million. Like most investors, our endowment took losses in the first quarter. So our endowment took a hit of about 8.8%, but that was less than the passive benchmark at 9.3% or our custom benchmark at 12.6%. That reflects our protection for downward shifts. We've continued to track up during the second quarter, and I expect for us to make up those losses at June 30th. So there were questions about the spring semester credits for room and board. It's important that everyone understand that those are credits towards the fall semester. So those credits will apply against tuition. They're not room and board credits. They're credits towards your total charges for the fall semester. So they will offset your fall tuition charges. Many questions about the bookstore. So the bookstore will be physically open. We will have an online portal, and students will be able to use that credit on their account towards bookstore purchases. So you can charge to your account where you have a credit balance, purchase online, or come into the bookstore. There have been questions about CARES Act funding. As many of you know, there were funds set aside to go directly to students. Dickinson did receive $700,000 for that, but in that form of funding. And we made those funds available to our Pell eligible students, our students who had the most significant financial challenges. To date, we've awarded about $450,000 directly to our students, having set aside some funds for the fall semester. Tuition insurance. Many of you know that we do offer tuition assistance, tuition insurance through Grad Guard. We've actually been in touch with that organization. They suggest if you're interested in continuing your insurance coverage, that you should apply for fall coverage only, because we don't know what the spring will yield for us. But in the fall semester, if your student should experience any health challenges as a result of a positive COVID diagnosis, they will process your claims as usual. So they will honor all claims relative to any health challenges that your student might incur. There have also been questions about student health insurance. Student health insurance is required of all of our students. So that requirement will stay in place. If you have insurance such that you don't need the college's insurance plan, that's fine. But students are required to maintain health insurance coverage as a matriculating student at Dickinson. Lastly, there were questions about, well, there's a lot of media coverage about how institutions are managing and handling their finances in the age of COVID. And I would like to tell you, as Margie stated at the onset, last year when Standard & Poor's did their review of Dickinson College, at a time when many institutions were downgraded, Dickinson was affirmed at its A+ rating and given a stable outlook. Here, we have been very transparent, very inclusive in our planning, and Dickinson is poised, positioned, and operating from a place of financial stability and quite prepared to handle the challenges that COVID has for us. So with that, I'll turn to Leah to answer some financial aid questions.
Absolutely. So quite a few of these, and I'm going to try and be as succinct as clear as possible, as I know this is a large stress for many folks. So just to clarify, room and board will not be charged for those not living on campus. So those are not going to appear on the bill. There are going to be no changes to merit aid, as that is not calculated based on cost. So one of my favorite things about Dickinson is that we meet full demonstrated need. And so that means that there is a calculation of that need and what it means. And there are two main factors that go into that calculation. The first is cost of attendance, and the second is estimated family contribution. So each time there's a change to the cost of attendance, we have to look at the revised need. So that is one of the reasons, the major reason that we are still working on getting the financial aid final letters out to folks. And we really do appreciate your patience. But essentially, if that cost of attendance changes, the financial aid changes in a similar way. Now, some of you may be thinking and have asked, well, it's still going to cost me money to have my student at home. And what does that look like? So we have put in a budget for a living allowance. And some people have been confused about that and thinking that that's an actual charge. That is not something that Dickinson is charging. It is simply what we're estimating that it costs for your child to be at home, to use your utilities, to have technology needs that may be increased because of the online study. And we've used strong data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics to come up with that, so that we're trying to be realistic, and the aid is scaled to that. So you're not losing aid on a dollar for dollar basis. We are accounting for the fact that you will have expenses of your student being at home, or that your parents will be at home. For students who are not able to live at home, please reach out to financial aid for more details on how that works. So we've had a lot of questions also about work study with being remote. The Student Employment Office is working diligently on identifying what employment opportunities are going to be able to be completed remotely, and students will be notified when there is more information on that. We have determined that international students attending remotely, as well as our first-year students, will not be able to work in a remote fashion, and the financial aid will take that into account. So as the cost of attendance goes down, that $1,250 that many students have in federal or institutional work study will be replaced with grant funding. So the grant will not be scaled down based on that work study. And so stay tuned for more information on that. Work study will be eligible for those hours worked. As Bronte mentioned earlier, the CARES Act allowed us, as well as an institutional policy, allowed us to pay students through the end of the fiscal year. That has not been extended to apply to this year as of yet. So students will be paid for wages worked. We're also getting quite a few questions about leave of absence and how that affects financial aid. You are eligible for 8 semesters of financial aid assistance at Dickinson. So if you take a leave, you're not using one of those semesters, and you're still eligible for the remaining when you come back. Merit aid is not affected by that. Need-based aid, if you take a full year off, we will be reevaluating aid based on 2019 data versus 2018 data. So that's something to keep in mind if you are considering that. But one of the biggest things that I want to flag for folks who borrow federal financial aid is any aid that you have currently borrowed will go into repayment after 6 months of your last date of attendance. So for those who stopped attending in May, repayment will start in mid-November. So we want to be sure our students have that information. And I just finally want to say that our office is here to stand with you. We know this is stressful, and we know that response times are not what they normally are as we try to get all of this done for everyone just as soon as we can. And so we thank you for your patience. Bills will be produced the week of August 3rd, and we'll have your financial aid piece out prior to that. Hoping to have continuing students out in the next 7 to 10 days, with first-year students following very shortly thereafter. And with that, I'm turning it over to Kathy Davenport, our VP of Enrollment Management. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. And before we come directly to me, I'm going to toss it back to Bronte for another question.
Yes, my apologies. I forgot to take the question about tuition increases. There have been quite a few questions about why Dickinson has not reduced its tuition. And I wanted to point out that Dickinson did suspend the tuition increase that we had previously planned for this year at 3.9%. I think it's important to note that with very few exceptions, all of our peer and aspirant institutions have moved forward with their annual increase in tuition. Most above 3.5% with an average of 3.65%. So we are in a kind of rare position insofar as we did freeze our tuition over last year's rates. One of our peer institutions made a big splash about their tuition increase or suspending or the tuition cut. And in actuality, they froze their rates at last year's levels as we did, but they took credit for a reduction in tuition rates. So I did want to speak to that question. Now I will indeed kick it to Kathy.
Great, thank you, Bronte. I'm batting cleanup today. So first of all, I wanted to also acknowledge that we know this is difficult. And we're with you, as Leah said. And one of the things I want to accomplish in my brief period is to talk through some terminology. You've received a lot of information on this call, and it's going to be a lot to process. So first of all, know that we're here to help you answer those questions. And as Provost Weissman said, I am happy to take your questions via email and set up phone calls because every family has some unique circumstances. But let me address some of the terminology that seems to be thrown around and can be confusing. Things like, can I defer? Can I take a leave of absence? How do I do those things? Let me start with the first year students and new transfer students. So members of the class of 2024 and new transfer students. If you would like to defer your enrollment at Dickinson for 1 semester or 2 semesters, you may do so. And you may do it by going through the deferral and gap request webpage so that you are able to fill out that form. We've moved the deadline for that form until this Friday, July 24th, so that you have good information from today, from your advising conversation last week, and as you talk with family about what is the right decision for me at this moment in time. So we have already moved that form, and you will find it readily available on the deferral and gap request page. The other important piece is for students to realize that you can do a 1 semester deferral, request to come in January of 2021, and then in the middle of October, we will reconnect with you to say, where are you with things? How are you thinking about this? Plus, we will have better information about what the spring might look like. So if at that time you would like to request to defer until August of 2021, we will work with you on making that next step occur. So just know that we will be walking side by side, helping you figure out what's the right step for me. As was already mentioned by Leah, if you do come in January of 2021 as an incoming first year student or transfer, then you are still a member of the class of 2024, and your need-based aid, as well as your merit scholarship, is all in play. If an incoming student decides to defer until the fall, until August of 2021, you're now a member of the class of 2025, and you will reapply for any need-based aid, but your academic merit scholarship will be held for you, that scholarship from Dickinson. If you have received outside scholarships, or you are receiving tuition exchange, please connect with those organizations to find out how they will treat that award if you defer for a semester or a year. That will be important to do. If you are a returning student, a member of the class of 2021, 2022, or 2023, you will not be requesting to defer, but rather seeking a leave of absence. And Angie Harris, who is in the student life area, handles those requests for leave of absence. This is an opportunity for you to take the fall semester off or to take fall and spring semester off. Again, filling out that information will be very beneficial for our planning purposes, but keep in mind what that means, especially if you've already borrowed money, federal loan. The repayment process, as was mentioned, will begin in November. If you are an international student, a first-year international student, class of 2024, we are still working out through our Center for Global Study and Engagement in concert with SEVP to determine what will be allowable for your status. In some cases, we've already informed you about programs taking place in countries such as Vietnam, China, and Korea. And you have that opportunity to begin your Dickinson experience by staying in country. But we will be providing more information to you in the next day or two once we have that guidance received and can put it into digestible information to pass along to you as well. For returning international students, you have received quite a bit of communication from CGSE regarding keeping in status and so forth. So please do pay attention to those emails and make sure if you have questions, you are reaching out to Melody and the appropriate staff in Global Ed so that they can walk you through your particular circumstances. The final term that I'll talk about briefly is withdrawing from the college. And that is where you are not requesting to step away for just a semester or a year, but you are stepping away completely and pursuing something else. Again, if you have questions about how this process works or what applies to me, please feel free to reach out to me, davenport@dickinson.edu, and I will work through the process with you. I'm now going to turn it back to President Ensign.
So let me begin by thanking my senior staff who have worked tirelessly since this began in March. And I'm sure all of you on this call understand their leadership and their incredible commitment to Dickinson. All of our remarks were based on your questions that have come in. I know many other questions have come in while we've been talking and we couldn't get to some of the specifics. We will be getting back to you, but I was looking at the thread. There's a couple I'll just comment on. I think this is a really important one. Yes, you can use your refund from the spring to apply it to tuition and fees. That's one that kept coming up. One on career services, the provost talked about that earlier. We are expanding our work in the Career Center. It'll be even more individualized, and seniors, don't worry, not only are we with you, our board and other alums have stepped up and are saying, how do we help these seniors make sure they move into a very different world? So that's really on our radar, don't worry about that. Some of you asked me, why did I say in the letter that went out that international students would be on campus? I'm sure you appreciate, especially those that are in the US, many cannot go home. Last I saw with Vietnam, our largest student population, nothing's opening up there till about September 15th. We've had international students and a few other students with us. And yes, that's why we said that in the letter. So none of them would panic. I'm so grateful to all of you for being with us today. All of us know this is a challenging moment, but we care about each and every one of you. And I know some of you disagree with my decision not to bring all students back. I wish we could, but as I said at the beginning, health and safety and well-being is our priority. We're going to continue to work relentlessly to make sure we can put in place the testing and the tracing that would allow us to do it safely. Some of you have posted notes, well, this university is doing it, and another. It is possible in different parts of the country, as I said, that there's better access to testing with a rapid turnaround. We don't have it at the moment. We will continue to work on that, don't worry, so that we can bring you back in the spring. There's nothing that any of us want to have happen more than to have you on this campus. I thank you very sincerely for your support of Dickinson. Remain Dickinson strong, because I'm more than ever convinced this is the education needed at this moment. As our lives have been transformed and upended, it's a Dickinson education that prepares young people for all the new positions that are emerging and for a new world that's right in front of us. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to my staff. Don't hesitate to reach out. As Leah said, we're all here for you. We will get back with emails to your questions. We'll be continuing all the time to update those FAQs. So please look there, but don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Our very best to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.